Welcome back. President Cyril Ramaphosa says he'll step down should he be charged with corruption. According to News 24, Ramaphosa made the claims during an interview. This after former Eskom CEO Brian Molefe implicated him at the State Capture Commission. Molefe accused Ramaphosa of a conflict of interest regarding Eskom. He also blames load shedding on the president. Joining me to analyse this now is political analyst Sanusha Naidu. Sanusha, always great to chat to you. So the president has said he'll step down should he be charged with corruption, yet he delayed his appearance before the ANC's Integrity Commission. These two positions seem a little bit at odds with each other.
Good afternoon, Anlie, and to the viewers. Yes, it does seem as if there's a bit of a delay between what he said yesterday in his interview with News 24 and then also on Power FM. And it seems to me that, what the president is doing is that he's throwing down almost a gauntlet to those who have kind of come out accusing him of all kinds of issues. And while he's trying to stay away from pronouncing, for example, on the Ace Magashule debacle, he's also trying to say that, if he presents himself to the commission and if it's found in the report that he's charged with any kind of wrongdoing, he'll step down. I would be very interested to see whether the report in itself, in terms of the recommendations made, how this would go forward. He did say that when he was probed and asked about the comments that Brian Molefe made at the commission yesterday, he did say that he will appear before the commission. So he kind of used that as a basis to say that, let me appear before the commission and I'll give my testimony before the commission and then take it from there. But I think at this point in time, everything is highly charged, and it seems as if the president seems confident that, given what the status quo is, that perhaps the idea that he will be implicated in any kind of corruption or wrongdoing is further from where it should be, and he seems to be thinking on the basis that, I have a bit of a bigger leverage or a bigger kind of yardstick in which to measure myself, because at the moment everything that's moving around me seems to be about the corruption that's happening internally to the party, although he stayed away from that very, very astutely in terms of his response in pronouncing about the Integrity Commission and the resolutions of NASREC and so forth. So he kind of very interestingly and astutely navigated that terrain. But whether or not he's, depending what the recommendations come from the Zondo Commission, and of course I think the bigger question now that would seize the Zondo Commission is whether former President Jacob Zuma would appear, because there we see that that's also playing out as a parallel issue.
I was going to ask this later, but seeing as you've brought up the former president, let me ask you now. So we have a former president refusing to appear before the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, and a current president delaying his appearance before the ANC's Integrity Commission. And we have to take account that they are very different sets of charges or allegations against the two of them, and they are no absolutes. But do you think we go a little bit easier on Cyril Ramaphosa, perhaps because we so desperately want a hero to save the country, and it's far easier to paint Jacob Zuma as the absolute villain?
Yeah, I think, very often we are caught up in the court of public opinion and how that court of public opinion informs the way we view things and the way we perceive things. So I think in the way that you presented it, you've got an ANC Integrity Commission and you've got the State Capture Inquiry Commission happening almost parallel and alongside each other. And the one seems to be dealing with a serious blight on the state, and the fact that former President Jacob Zuma has actually had many of his court cases put into a state where he has to, the results have been, or the outcomes and the judgments have been that he has to account for what has happened, but keeps using the legal system and the judiciary in a way to fight his battle. Whereas in the case of President Ramaphosa, you're dealing with an internal party issue. And I think to a large extent, the focus is really on the state capture, because in terms of the internal, it seems to be, we deal with this in terms of what happens within the confines of the party. And I think also what's important here is that to a large extent, my own view is that the state Capture Commission, if you look at its terms and you look at how its inception came about, it was really around the recommendations made by the former public protector. And at the heart of those recommendations and the need for a commission of inquiry was around Nkandla, was around the fact that there was something untoward that the former president had been engaging in, and therefore it is about that. It kind of gives the impression, and it's very hard to separate the two, that it is about him. So it comes full circle in that way. And therefore, I think as South Africans, which is the lesser of the two is a bigger question. I think if we take a standard approach, a standard issue approach about corruption, and that there's no kind of dropping the ball in one and having a kind of different set of criteria for the other, we've got to treat corruption as corruption, and we've got to use it in the way that says that we have to have all those that are implicated, depending on what the outcome is, depending what the recommendations, depending on what the investigation is. If it's found that somebody has committed corruption, then we have to basically apply the letter of the law in that way. So I think this is where we kind of caught up with how we actually see personalities in politics, and I think it's very difficult at times to try and disaggregate the two, because we kind of have already made up our minds in some way around one personality versus another.
Given that we need to, as you say, apply one set of criteria to judge corruption and not, differentiate our approach based on who the person is that's accused, how significant are the allegations made by Brian Molefe against the president?
Well, it's quite interesting. I mean, I think it's something that would play into those sections and quarters and sectors of society, and even within the governance structure of the state, where those believe that Ramaphosa has to be held accountable or answer to some of the issues that has come up in terms of the accusations and allegations that have been made against him. So it definitely will talk to a section of the population who believe that we should not necessarily see Ramaphosa as this kind of a knight in shining armor, so to speak, in inverted commas. And I think to that section, whether it's in the party, whether it's in the broad structures of the party, and even outside of the party, however they define their identity and their ideological leaning, they would actually say that this is about individuals that have actually aligned themselves to particular resources, actors, sections of the population, both in business and outside of business, who have made money out of the system. So I think for President Ramaphosa, it's, as he said, he will use the time at the State Capture Commission to answer those allegations and put forward his testimony in front of the Deputy Justice Zondo, I think is going to be important as well to refute the claims that are made. But it doesn't necessarily mean that people will forget those claims. There will be those media spaces, other spaces, etc., that will bring it back and say, hang on, we need to actually ask this question in a much more critical way and say, is this real? What's the value of it? And I think we had this lesson last week when we saw how the whole question about the U.S. and the question about the idea that this election was stolen actually fermented, and then you saw the impact of that, where people actually genuinely believe that something was untoward in that election. I think in any society, when you start putting out these kinds of accusations and allegations, the onus is on the person who is being accused to prove the burden and to be shown that they haven't really done anything wrong. But again, it's hard to dissuade people. There will be sections of the population that would say, well, let's go and see what happened, because maybe he's not as innocent as he thinks, as perhaps others in society believe that President Ramaphosa is innocent and doesn't have anything to account for or to be held accountable for.
The issues surrounding the CR17 fund allegations, they're not likely to go away anytime soon. So how should the president be handling this matter to set an example of accountability?
Well, I think to a large extent it's an unprecedented issue that has come and seized the ANC, particularly because it has never been dealt with before. It has never come up before around campaigning, etc. But it also tells you the level at which party funding and internal party campaigning around financial resources is such a critical factor, if not a significant driver of winning internal elections and so forth. I think for the president, perhaps he could actually kind of disarm some of his critics and detractors in the party by maybe actually being a little bit more open about some of the contributions, etc. But then by doing that, I think he is also going to try and ask and maybe try and use that as a way to say, well, if I'm going to open up and be accountable and try and give some kind of level of information about the resources and the way the CR17 campaign was funded, then it also means that the counterforce, which is the Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma camp, will also have to do the same. It can't be one or the other. So I think that's going to be a very, very important issue to watch in terms of whether the party also takes into its stride a kind of accountability around how funding mechanisms take place, if not also aligned to the idea or the legislation around political party funding in South Africa and the legislation that needs to be now put into practice.
Thank you very much for your insights, Sanusha Naidu, political analyst, speaking to us there.